This is Economics 111 with James Tierney. We did economic growth. My name is Steve Tobias.
Neha Anwar.
Jay Palmer.
Chris Lopez.
So what is economic growth?
Well, it's an increase in the capacity of an economy to produce goods and services compared from one period of time to another.
Economic growth can be measured in nominal terms, which include inflation, or in real terms, which are adjusted for inflation.
A few key economic indicators are as follows: GDP, which is gross domestic product, CPI, which is consumer price index, and lastly, unemployment rate.
Now, what we could also add to this is the housing market. Normally, the economy is in direct relationship with how the housing market is, and such things like foreclosure rate.
In this presentation, we will analyze the economic growth from the years 2000 to 2013.
So we broke it down into time periods, and this is 2000 to 2002. During the year 2000, the GDP growth rate was 4.2%, and then it dipped down to 1.1% in 2001.
This indicates that the economy was slipping into a recession after a 10-year expansion period.
The 9/11 attacks had a significant impact on the economy because it hurt consumer confidence and led to large spending on the War of Terror.
9/11 was just one of the incidents that affected the economic conditions.
By the fourth quarter of 2000, the economy was experiencing a significant decline in growth that continued well onto the first 2 quarters of 2001.
In the third quarter of 2001, however, the economy experienced a notable expansion. This was partially influenced by the boom in the housing market.
We also see a residential investment increase, and that climbed through the third quarter of 2001. Some people argue that appreciation in home prices stimulated consumer spending and thereby helped to keep the 2001 recession relatively short and shallow.
In 2002, the GDP growth rate started climbing back up and rose to 1.8%. Although the economy was in an expansion, the unemployment rate continued to rise and reached 6.0% by December 2002, for the first time since 1994.
Now we're going to move on to the time period between 2003 and 2007. During this 4-year time period, the economy was in a steady state of expansion. In 2003, the unemployment rate exhibited a dramatic decrease from 6% to 4.4%.
Although housing purchases were declining, they were still at a historically high rate. This contributed to job growth in retail, residential construction, and other housing-related businesses.
Aside from the housing market, President George W. Bush implemented tax cuts that stimulated economic and employment growth.
As you can see on this lovely graph from Fred, that sums it up pretty much. GDP continued to increase throughout this time period until the housing market started to decline in 2008. The 2007 marks the end of the expansion as economic growth starts to fall.
As you can see, these stats are broken down quarterly between the years 2007 and 2010.
Our growth was negative from 2008 to 2009, and this is directly correlated with the housing market. This is one of the biggest pitfalls the U.S. economy has ever faced since the Great Depression.
According to the Washington Post, the recession hit home for the middle class the most. The median net worth of families plunged by 39% in just 3 years, from $126,400 in 2007 to $77,300 in 2010. That puts Americans roughly on par with where they were in 1992. That has to be devastating.
It was the implosion of the housing market that inflicted much of the pain. The median value of Americans' stake in their homes fell by 42% between 2007 and 2010 to $55,000, according to the Fed. Moving on to the recent years of 2010 and 2012, we see that the mortgage rate spiked in the 2010 time period. After the Great Recession of 2008 to 2009, the economy was in a questionable state, yet still endured steady economic growth.
After a steep run-up in prices during the first half of the decade, home values have plummeted back to 2003 levels. The unemployment declined from 9.8 in 2010 to 7.8 by the end of December 2012.
The 2010 to 2012 time period was a period of recovery for the housing market bust and the Great Recession of 2008 to 2009. The graph found on BLS.gov on the left shows that the unemployment rate declined steadily throughout the 2-year time period.
Additionally, our GDP expanded steadily in the first 2 quarters of 2010 until 2011. The graph on the right shows how the economic bailout that American companies were given finally paid off. The economic growth rate started to climb up steadily throughout the year.
As you can see, the U.S. economy is a prime example of how economic growth occurs and is affected by different factors such as the housing market. So stay beautiful and don't let the economic state bring you down, because after all, it's just a cycle of life.
It's the sun.